Sean Bell joins us, and just one other element just to bring into all of this as well. I'm just reading from Reuters that the Israeli military says it has begun striking Hezbollah infrastructure in several sites in areas in Lebanon. So the IDF, the Israeli military, according to Reuters, saying that it has begun striking Hezbollah infrastructure sites in several areas in Lebanon. There is, on paper, a ceasefire between Hezbollah and Israel, but conflict has continued regardless. There has been shelling from Hezbollah towards IDF sites. There has been numerous strikes by the IDF. Yesterday, the figure being quoted was that since Thursday, 110 people had been killed in those strikes there, despite the fact that there is, on paper, a ceasefire. Well, let's bring in Sean Bell for more on the latest between the US and Iran. And the last hour, you and I were talking, we had this one source, Axios, saying it looks as though Iran and the US are drawing up a one-pager. Now, Reuters says they've heard from Pakistani sources very similar commentary. I'm always looking at the screen of my desk to see who the next feed is going to come from. So we feel as though we're maybe honing in a little more firmly about the idea that there is some memo being drawn up. What do you make of that?
Yeah, as you and I discussed before, I think one of my degree of scepticism is that if you look at the number of times President Trump said talks are progressing well, in other words, there's a potential of peace, it's dozens, literally, since the start of the war. So he's always start this with a degree of scepticism. However, when you look at where we sit today, and we'll get into it maybe, but where Project Freedom lasted a few hours and then it was stopped, President Trump's frustration at the inability of the military operation to take effect, you've got to therefore either negotiate or walk away. And finding a way of negotiation when you're really uncomfortable, because it's evident Iran has leverage, I think is very difficult. There's some really telling things, though, in here. What we understand from some of the lines that are coming out from this Pakistan brokered deal, one of which is a moratorium on nuclear enrichment and the potential to release frozen assets and lift sanctions. Now, whilst we're between on there, I'll just refresh myself on what moratorium means. It is a temporary, it's not a permanent, it's a temporary. So that's not going to be something that's going to be, America's going to be happy with, because all it does effectively is kick the can down the road. It doesn't solve the problem, which President Trump has always said at the heart is we cannot allow Iran to have nuclear weapons. So a moratorium on anything doesn't actually solve it. The other thing that I caught my eye was it talks about a one-pager. Well, it took 18 months, 20 months of negotiation to get to the last deal. You're not going to solve it in a one-pager. One-pager is nothing more, I think I heard Tara say, nothing more than a framework, a memo of understanding, which can be all things to all people. So it could be used by President Trump to claim success, also the Iranians claim success. But if that is the way to bring the hostilities to end, to open the Strait of Hormuz and then allow negotiations to happen downstream, that probably will be seen as success. The big thing in the way of that, I suspect, will be the Americans, and particularly President Trump, because there'd have to be a lot of ground given for that to gain traction.
So that is in the works, let's say. Meanwhile, Project Freedom is on pause. There is seemingly little, if no, transit of commercial ships through the Strait of Hormuz. The blockade of Iranian ports continues by the US. Meanwhile, Iran says it's continuing its kind of blockade of the Strip as well. Its mines are still in that key zone at the tip of the azimuth there of the bend. So where does all of this leave us? Because there's mines floating around, there's a blockade, there's a counter-blockade, there's no shipping passing through, the straits are still closed, there's a draft in the works, and we're on day 68.
Yeah, I think for me, at its bare bones, Project Freedom was meant to be a humanitarian effort, but at its heart, it was breaking the blockade. American going, what are you going to use military might? There was a huge fanfare. Just remember, Central Command said, we're going to use 15,000 troops. We're going to use aircraft carriers. We're going to use 100 fighter jets, land and sea-based, and destroyers. And I remember Hegseth turned around and said, there's a red, white and blue dome going to be erected. Well, within hours, it failed, bluntly failed, and that will be seen by Iran as a positive thing. All that underlines is that whatever the challenge at the moment in the Strait of Hormuz, it is not going to be solved militarily. And this isn't just me saying it. We've won war game this before. I'm sure the American military will be providing exactly the same advice, and despite the rhetoric. So those three stark choices for America are either escalate, And I wouldn't take that off the table, because I think if the nuclear conversation is not satisfactory, they may well do a midnight hammer too against key sites that they think they just want to be absolutely sure that Iran hasn't got capability there. The negotiating line we've really just discussed, and the other one is just literally to walk away. And I know that's has all sorts of loose ends left behind it, but it is possible. The one other carrot here, the one other potential ray of light, is that yesterday there was reports of the Iranian delegation going to China. Why is that important? It's important because China buys a lot of oil from Iran. It's therefore a vested interest. Who is going to visit Xi Jinping on the 14th and 15th of this month? President Trump. Lots of key deals to be done there, and it might well be that there's a sort of nexus of shared interests there. That who would have believed that potentially China could end up being a broker to try to create an off-ramp for President Trump? Certainly has a lot of appeal diplomatically. Another 10 days for that dust to settle.
Could China be trusted with that nuclear material? One might see it potentially heading there. Russia had offered to do it instead, but there's a lot to work through. There's another 7 or so days to get to before we get to the 14th. Yes. Well, stick with us for all the details. Sean, good to have you with us. Thank you.